Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining me. We are studying today from selections from of Lekutei Sichot, the second talk of Nitzavim. This week, for this year, we combined two portions, Nitzavim and Vayelech, and this is part of the talk that Moshe Rabbeinu, is giving the Jewish people on the day he passed away. The second parsha, Vayelech, we read, Moshe turns to Yehoshua, and he says, today I am leaving the universe. This is on the 7th of Adar, his birthday, at the age of 120. Towards the end of the section of Nitzavim, we read the following verse. Achaim ve'amavet natati lefanecha, life and death I place before you. Uvacharta b'chaim, choose life, leman tichyeh, so you should live, ata vezarecha, you and your descendants. So again, God says, I place before each one of us life and death, and choose life so that you may live, you and your descendants. Rashi, something bothered Rashi, even though it's a straightforward verse. Rashi says three separate things, Rashi addressing choose life. God says, I am pointing out to you life, meaning studying Torah and mitzvot, and choose life. I'm pointing out, what do you mean I place before you life and death? Life is the observance of Torah and mitzvot, and death is the letting go of Torah and mitzvot. Choose life. That's Rashi says. Ani more. More is a teacher or pointing out. I point out to you, this is life, Torah and mitzvot. The second one, Rashi says, I have a parable. What's the parable? A father who takes his son to a place, to a property. And he says to him, this is the best property you can have. Choose this property. And number 3, Rashi says, in the book of Psalm, it says, Ata tamich gorali. Ata tamich gorali, it's a book, a chapter in Psalm, a verse in Psalm. Says Rashi, this is what the verse means. Ata, you, tamich. Tamich means point out or supporting me, gorali, my share, my lot. Says the Rebbe, what bothered Rashi in this text that is not straightforward? I place it for you, life and death, obey my commands, listen to me, is life. Don't listen to me, is death. You're separating from me. Why is Rashi needed to give us 3 different points, seemingly to address difficulty in the text itself? Number 2, Rashi says that if you compare the parable to the actual teaching, the point that the parable is trying to bring out, the parable is a much more difficult to understand. It says that the father is taking his son to a place, and he says, this is a good place, choose this place. Where does God is doing the same thing by us? By us, God is not taking us anywhere, and he's not pointing out choose, he's just giving us commandments, and we have to obey. In other words, some parts of the parable are so difficult to compare to the point that Rashi is making. And the third is, Rashi tells us a verse in the Tehillim, and he says, Ve'al ze ne'emar. This is the meaning of the verse. It doesn't say because it's written in Tehillim, in the book of Psalm, Ata tamich gorali. It says, Ve'al ze ne'emar. This is the meaning. Since when Rashi is going to teach us the interpretation and the meaning of a verse in the book of Psalm. Psalm is a whole different book. Rashi is addressing his text to a 5 years old, a very wise 5 years old. I wish I was be as half as wise, but it's about the text itself in here. Rashi is never going to address another text in the book of Psalm and explain that's what it means. These are the 3 questions that Rabbi asked about the 3 interpretations that Rashi is bringing to a simple, I place before you life and death, choose life. So Rashi says, I'm pointing out to you, this is life. And the next one, Rashi says, just like a father takes his son on a piece of property and he says, choose this because it's good. And the third one, Rashi says, that's what the meaning in the verse, you will support, you will give me my lot. It means that God is pointing out and says, this is the best place. God is guarding us and making sure that we know what's the best part. Rashi is not here to teach Tehillim. Number two, Rashi does not need the parable because the parable makes it more difficult to understand the simple text. And number three, why Rashi tells us, God says, I'm asking you to choose life. That's the text. It's a very simple text. Yes?
1, 2, 3 sounds almost alike. The father takes the son and says, choose this. And Hashem also says, choose this.
Okay, very good. So why do you need that? The question the Rebbe is asking is why Rashi is bothering to explain. What is difficult for someone that Rashi is addressing? What difficulty Rashi is addressing? Yes.
But Hashem took us to a place and said, choose this too. He took us from Egypt to Mount Sinai.
Right, but he's not talking about taking us to Mount Sinai. He's talking about observance of Torah and mitzvot.
Well, isn't that what we learned at Mount Sinai?
And therefore, this is something that's applicable to all future generations. Being on Mount Sinai is an event that took place at a certain date. But that's not, we were all there, all the souls. But that's not what the Torah tells us, choose life. Choose life means choose to serve God. The Rabbi is asking many other questions. And it's just that because we're not reading it in the text itself and we don't have the 2.5 hours to study it, but it's a fascinating discussion. Here is the Rebbe's answer. The Rebbe says that the idea of choose life, I place before you life and death, choose life, is already mentioned in the Torah several times. In the book of Deuteronomy, in the portion of Re'eh, and before, I believe even in Va'etchanan, God says, and I place before you life and death, and choose life. Im bechukotai telechu, if you go in my law, in my commandments, it says, God says, you will be blessed, and if you don't, you'll be cursed. And God says you will get life, or you will, the opposite. The curses last week in Tavo, it's all about life and death. It says that you will be chaste. It says you will be homeless. It says mothers will eat the flesh of their children. So what suddenly Moshe is teaching the Jewish people, I place before you life and death, and I tell you choose life. It's already mentioned before. In addition, says the Rebbe, the second interpretation of the parable, before we get into the comparison, the full comparison, there is a very small details that is very, very important. What does God says? God says, I place before you life and death and choose life. The idea of choose life is the first time God says. Previously, God says, I place before you life and death. And it's self-understood. You follow God, you are choosing life. You don't follow God, you're choosing death. The idea of choosing life is not a commandment. It's an advice. You cannot command someone, says the Rebbe, to choose life. Because one of the two, either if he understands that God's commandments is life, then you don't need to teach him because everybody wants to live. And if he does not know, telling him that, it will not help. And therefore, says the Rebbe here, when God says choose life, Rashi was bothered. What does Rashi mean when God is advising a person to choose life, which he never said before? And therefore, in the story of the parable, there is one more thing, and that is the father placed him on the location where is a life, was a blessing, and he points out and he says, choose this to your lot. Right? That's the parable. Says the Rebbe, God tells us the following. Life in general has a lot of ups and downs, but you can choose life, and I'm advising you to choose life, even though sometimes it seems, or it looks like the opposite of life. Just like a father takes his son to a property, and he says, this is the best choices property, God, who created the universe, surely knows what's the best part of the universe. And he comes to us and says, I created life and death. And I'm here to tell you, I'm giving you advice Obey my commands, because as the one who knows the entire land, I am telling you, this is the choices. This is the best part of the universe. And choose life, even if it's very painful, even though you lose a job, even though you're very poor. In other words, despite all the realities of this day-to-day life, sometimes, because the son in the parable of the father taking him, the child has no idea which property is the best, is the most fertile piece of land. The father says, here, he takes them there, number one, and then he also tells them, choose this part. Says the Rebbe, that's what Rashi wanted to teach us. God placing us here wants us to know that anywhere he places us, with all our talents and faults, all our failings, all our mismanagement, is like a father taking his son to the best piece of property, or the son has no clue. We have no clue. And then God says, choose this. The father points out to the son and says, pick this property as you lot, because that's the best thing for you. In other words, in day-to-day life, there are many, many times where choosing the Torah sounds and feels as something that's very negative, that's something that's very bad, that's something that will take us away from the goodness of life. The Rebbe, now we can understand why it says that a father takes his son and points out that property. Because A, the father knows the property before the son knew about it. And number two, the father always will do good for his son. It's not like a friend or a teacher or someone who takes another person and says, this is a property you should choose. It's for his own son. Therefore, his best interest is for the son's benefit. And that's what God says. I place it for you, life and death. When I created you, there are two choices. But I'm advising you, choose life, and I'm pointing out, just like in the parable, choose life. You know what life is? Obey God, study Torah, keep kosher, celebrate the holidays, all of the 613 commandments. And that is something new in this expression. So that's why Rashi says that I am telling you to choose life as an advice. In addition, Rashi brings a parable from a father taking his son to a piece of property. And finally, Rashi says, that's what the verse in Psalm says, Atat amich gorali, you have supported me with my lot. Rashi is here to tell us that in life, there is not always fair. Not everything is fair. That's why the word in my lot is the word lot, goral. Lot is like, it doesn't always make sense. What is lottery? Lottery is by chance. Lottery is not wisdom. Lottery is not knowledge unless you break in the rules and you take, you have advice which you're not supposed to. Lot is you cast names or you cast numbers and the one you picked. A verse in Psalm says, Atat amich gorali. Gorali is not my share. Gorali is not my inheritance. Gorali is my lot. My lot, meaning that from the behind the scene, only God knows my share, what I'm supposed to. To me, it looks like a lot. So God made me not very smart. God made me unsuccessful. God made me not be able to learn very well like everybody else. That's my lot. Says God, this is the best thing for you. And the Rebbe goes on to say that when it comes to casting lots, there are two types of casting lots. There is one, like the Jewish people entering the Holy Land, dividing the land. God predetermined the lot for each tribe. And the lot itself spoke. It was a miracle. It says that the lot would speak. And says, Reuben, this one, Shimon. Then there is another casting of lots, different lots, like on Yom Kippur, you have two bulls, two rams, and they have to be the same height, the same color, the same look, and the same value, financial value, and you put both of them, you put two papers in a basket, and they can lift one and puts on the right, lift one, puts on the left. One is to God, a sacrifice, the other is Azazel, to Mount Azazel, where there is going to be thrown, cast away together with the sins. In other words, there is no rhyme and reason from our point of view. God and that's why Rashi is bringing the third verse. And the Rebbe goes on to say that this is the idea of Rosh Hashanah. Comes Rosh Hashanah. God wants us to know we can ask for life. we can ask for a blessing next week. That's why you always read it before Rosh Hashanah. Nitzavim, this portion, Vayelech, sometimes you read after. This year you read it also before on the same Shabbat. But Nitzavim is always the last Shabbat of the year, because God says to us, when you come to me on Rosh Hashanah, you should ask for benefits, you should ask for tranquility, you should ask for success, you should ask for happiness, you should ask for wisdom, you should ask for making new relationship and building and doing. At the same time, realize that the idea of choosing life has nothing to do with what you think is good for you, what you want, but rather it's from God's point of view. That the Rebbe points out, that's why in our life we see that the wicked many times are much more successful, because God is pointing out that the real success, the real happiness comes after life, at the end of life. And that's something we don't see. And that's something that seemingly does not affect us directly. But just like a father takes his son, and his son has no clue which land he should choose, and he says, pick this one because that's your best part, and sound says that this is a lot. So too, when we observe God's commandments and study Torah, we are able to serve God in that way and be able to acquire the best part for our life. I hope I made myself clear. Any questions?
It seems to me the whole Torah prepares you for this.
The whole Torah, and that's why it's at the end. Is that what you mean? That's why it's towards the end. Thank you very much. So Harry says that that's the reason it comes towards the end of the Torah, the 5 books, because all of that is leading to that point. And again, this is an advice, a good advice, and at the same time, it's not going to be a rosy path. And at the same time, if we stick to the plan, this is life. Thank you very much. I hope I made myself clear.